Hello and welcome to What's the Difference podcast.
My name's Claire.
My name's Nathan.
And one day we'll get that right.
And one day we'll get that right. So, Claire, my story today takes us to not Italy, but Sicily, which is just off the coast of Italy. And it is actually a story. Guess what, folks? Because it's Sicily, it's not from USA.
Not America.
It's not America for once at all.
Yeah.
So 16th of January this year, 2023, some of us may have heard this story or maybe not. It may have passed us by. A man was heading into a cafe just outside a private Sicilian medical clinic, when a policeman approached him and asked him his name. Now, he didn't tell a lie. Now, you're thinking, well, why would he tell a lie?
Yeah.
He says, he may have looked it up and he said, you know who I am. I am Matteo Messano Denaro. And Matteo was Italy's most wanted mobster. He had been on the run since 1993. So for 30 years he had been on the run.
No.
So he was what's called the boss of bosses of the Costa Nostra, which, for anybody who doesn't know what that is the Sicilian Mafia. It used to be made up of many families, and heads got arrested and assassinated, and all sorts of things happened. So eventually there was just him. He was the boss of bosses. He was the man. He was the top don. Whatever you want to call him. Yeah. He was the man.
He was it.
He was. That was exactly it. But what was really strange, though, is that the police didn't actually know it was definitely him until he actually said, I am Matteo Messino Denaro.
Oh, okay.
Because for 30 years, all the investigators had was a composite picture of him, computer composite, and a few short snippets of his voice. He had made such a good job of not being seen, not being found.
Yeah.
It made it really, really hard for them to find him. So obviously, with the Mafia, it tends to be that you're only going to get found for a couple of reasons. One is you fall out of favor, or you're not worth anymore. So maybe somebody will just inform on you so they can get rid of you.
Yeah.
Two, you're done in, you're shot because something happens. Always have a long life expectancy. Does it be that sort of work?
No. They're not friendly people, are they?
Yeah, and the third one is just the police find you, you get arrested, and then occasionally some people leave, but tends not to work very well if you try and leave and things like that. But, has a sort of permanency if you try and leave.
Yeah.
But at the news conference, the police said, no, this wasn't that somebody had told on him. They had combined what they call old school investigative methods with modern technology to narrow down their suspects. And this is how they described it, is that over the years, a sort of smoke screen had formed around him. And that was made up of a network of people that were loyal to him. So if anybody has ever looked into anything around the Sicilian Mafia keeps itself protected because of the fact that it pays people, it bribes people, it in some ways they are the governing force within certain areas of Sicily and even some parts of Italy. Or it's going less and less because it's getting cracked down more and more.
Yeah.
But there's huge amounts of loyalty, and that loyalty is done out of the fact of actually because they do some good in some places, because they provide money and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously people feel loyal to that, and also a sense of loyalty around the fact of there's sort of quite a lot of loyalty when somebody else has a gun and you don't. So those things do sort of breed loyalty, don't they? And sort of think
funny that.
they have their own personal army. So. But what the police had done is, over decades, they had been trying to slowly but surely break down everything about his network. So they cracked down anyone who they suspected was protecting him or aiding him.
Yeah.
And over the period of 30 years, over 100 people were arrested, and that including his own siblings, and the seized business and financial assets worth around about 130 million pounds. For those in Europe, that's 150 million euros. For those in America, it's a lot of dollars. I can't remember what it is, but I think of the rough conversion, I think that's probably around about 170 million or something like that, probably roughly, I think. Probably slightly less. It depends on which day we're on and how the pound.
But
what they said, this gradually weakened his network, and eventually it just made him more vulnerable. and the smoke screen behind him started to clear. And the gentleman said that was General Teo Luzzini, and he was one of the police chiefs that was in charge of this investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, while all this was doing, how they got to that point was that they started to do wiretaps of his relatives and of his acquaintances. And that's where the story takes a really interesting turn, because there's another sideline story. This is like an onion. There's a story inside a story with this story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Because the police had gone to do a wiretap or to put a secret bug somewhere. We've spoken about bugs and spies in the last one, actually. About how some of that world works. And they'd gone around looking for places. Well, where could you put a different bug in there? And they'd gone to his sister's house. And his sister's house was in a place called Castelvetrano, which was in...
Easy for you to say.
Hey, I've got that written phonetically so I can remember how to say it. But it's in the west of Sicily. Again, no map, folks.
Yeah.
Sicily's down near the bottom of the boot of Italy. The bit that looks like it's kicking something. It's kicking Sicily. Yeah. It's kicking Sicily. That's where it is. And so they'd gone to the house of his sister, who was called Rosetta. She was eventually detained. Eventually. But what happened is when they went there, they said they're looking around for somewhere to put it, and they saw like an aluminium chair, and they thought, actually, it'd be great to put it inside the chair leg, because you move chairs round, you don't go look at those things.
Yeah. So
they took the bottom off this chair leg. Obviously, it had a little stopper on. They pulled it off, and out dropped a note. And they pulled open the note, and it was a jumble of words and sort of signs and letters.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's evidence. They took a picture of it.
Yeah.
What that note happened to be is something called a pizzano. Now, pizzano in Italian, it just means a small piece of paper. But what it means in the mafia world is it's how, if you're a mafia don, how you transfer your instructions and notes around, because you don't use technology. You wrap it up in little bits of fabric or paper, and they write it. It's an encrypted note. Now, the whole purpose of that note is passed and then destroyed. So the encryption is not the most heaviest, but it's done in a certain way. So if anybody wants to go look it up, it's done on something called the Caesar cipher, which is named after Julius Caesar, and other variations of that, which basically means they just go, this is A, count 3 letters across. Oh, that now becomes D. It's the key stuff you do as kids. We used to have little secret thing, little code wheel things. It's the first thing you get at spy kits. It's all those things that you probably got. Kids, yes, there were spy kits at one time. It wasn't all computers. One time there was
invisible
things.
Ink and those kind of things.
Invisible ink and all those sort of things. It was. Yeah. I mean, and there was variants of that made it a bit more from there. Obviously, you pass on the note. You know how to find the cipher. You read the note. Yeah. But you just stop somebody glancing at it, or whoever's passing the message on doesn't know what's being said in it.
Okay.
And that small piece of paper was used by Mazzini to communicate with his relatives and all those that are affiliated with him. But once he analysed it and they decrypted it, because it wasn't really hard decryption, let's face it, it documented a man who was struggling with colon cancer.
Right.
So the police were then able to focus their attention just on trying to find this man, but they realised that the only way that they could do that is start looking around everything to do with colon cancer. Now, the interesting point is that what the judge said in here is that the historic result of the capture of this note was actually one of the... so it's basically what he was talking about. It's one of the key pivotal moments in the whole case.
Right.
If Rosanna had destroyed it as it's supposed to have been done and not kept his note shoved under a chair leg, the police who had gone to do a wiretap wouldn't have found the note, which then told more details, because obviously they had suspicions. That's why they were doing wiretaps. They thought they may have found their man, but obviously they became aware because they had the notes. They were now listening to wiretaps. They're aware in the conversations that they were listening to the family that people were talking about people with cancers and cancer surgeries in generic terms. And that sort of tipped them off, along with now the fact that they had the note, that had a picture of the note, because obviously they put the note back and put them in there. And that allowed them then to go, actually, he's sick. So maybe now we need to start monitoring internet searches of people who've got things like Crohn's disease, because they were intercepting things, and they were intercepting, and they were doing searches of things like Crohn's disease and liver cancer, and that was being done by his associates and by his family. Right. And that led them to see that actually, is this mafia boss now seeking treatment? Now, if you're seeking treatment, that becomes a bit easier to narrow people down.
Doctors.
Yes. Obviously, they knew how old he was. So they then went and gathered all the medical details of all male cancer patients that were born in 1962 in the town that he was born in Western Sicily. Now, as you can go, this is getting narrower and narrower at this point.
Yeah.
And they managed to narrow it down to 10 suspects and then to 5 suspects. Mm-hmm. But then a name jumped out to them, and this man was called Andrea Bonafendi. But he and it's just, I mean, I'm sure Andre and Bonafendi is quite a normal name in those areas. I'm not going to go and say that I don't understand the layout and distribution of of names in Sicily. But he turned out to be the nephew of a deceased mafia boss called Leonardo Bonafendi. So something's quite strange here. Now, a man who'd been identified as him is said to have had surgery in Palermo, which is in Sicily. Twice in 2020 and 2021. But when they went and mapped, because obviously they were doing lots of wiretapping and location, went and mapped the real phone that belonged to Andre Bonafendi, they realized that he was miles away from the Sicilian capital on one of the 2 days that he apparently went under the knife. So one day it showed he was nearby, but next day he wasn't there. So how could he be? And obviously when you do anything like phone analysis, they would also look at where has that phone been prior to that point, so you can see somebody moving. That's how they track people moving. They track you because you're moving between different
because you've always got your phone on you.
Yeah, and it's not even about them. I think we can do a different story about that, but in essence, you don't need GPS to track somebody. You can triangulate somebody from the fact the phone masts at a certain place and where it's stronger, and when it hands off to the next one, then thus you are traveling and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, that's a different story, different day. So they then realized that, okay, let's look back to everything else. They did more research and realized that this person now has a chemotherapy session now booked in his name. So at that point, the Italian police, the Carabinieri, realized, you know what, we've got a chance here. We've got a chance of catching this man. So on the Monday morning of that he was going for this appointment, Massini, and more than 100 members of the armed forces surrounded this clinic.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I mean,
taking no chances.
Yeah, taking no chances. But I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And thus, that was when he was arrested. But what they said was that, as we saw, he was arrested. But for them, it had been such a source of frustration to them because of just how long it had taken. He'd almost turned into a myth. It was like a mythical thing. There'd been sightings
of him. They didn't even have a photograph of him.
No. All they had was some old pictures that they had to age to try and make it out. But there was a composite of different bits. A composite is normally where they'll get little bits of a face. So they might have seen little shots from them, and they've made it up. And the little snapshots of his voice, obviously when he was younger, and then you have to age that. So
try and age it,
But what was really interesting, the reason why this was the case, because what they said about him was that, and it was a professor that had looked into this as well. He was Professor Galeaz. Galeaz? Yeah, Professor Galeaz.
Don't be that,
What he said, of course, he was forced to live extremely cautiously. He had to calculate every move to perfection.
Yeah.
So it was his associates' internet searches that may have contributed to his arrest. And it's unlikely he himself ever used technology because the risk of being found.
Yeah. To keep off the grid.
And what they basically said is that a mafia boss, in order to operate undisturbed, has to stay away from technology. They have to return to almost a completely primitive way of life, going back to the roots of just verbal communication and creating a parallel, sophisticated secret code that's passed between different things. People talking codes. You never talk about the person name. They have a code name. I think his sister's code name was Strawberry or something like that. Or it might have been her name. There was different names they all had. I can't remember a bit from there.
Yeah.
But the reality is, this man, yes, he had cancer. I know it's very sad that anybody is inflicted with cancer. But and you think, well, actually, should you go after this man? Why would you go after the man? And I was thinking, actually, why did they just not?
Mm.
But and obviously, because of who he is, it doesn't matter if he's got cancer; he's still got that.
No.
But then I suddenly realised when he got to the end of one of the research articles I was looking at, he says he was the mobster that once boasted he could fill a cemetery with his victims.
Oh,
Yeah, and they said
yeah.
up until he disappeared in the 90s, the murders were being committed on a daily basis.
Oh
And he
wow. Yeah. Not a
and
nice guy.
um, Machine De Niro committed some of the most violent, cruel crimes in Italy
Mm.
that fucking remembered. So he basically,
Yeah.
in 2002, he'd already been sentenced, tried and sentenced in
Oh,
what's the word?
absentia? Absentia, I
Absentia.
think.
Yes, absentia. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. Yes, I'm going to go with your legal understanding of that word. Yeah, absentia. Because it was just literally, it was that one thing after another after another. It was
Yeah.
he he killed some of the state prosecutors that had been involved with the ones at anti-mafia.
Oh my
He
goodness.
killed the pregnant girlfriend of another boss. He had a
Oh,
bomb attack which killed 10 people. He kidnapped and killed an 11-year-old son of somebody else who had turned witness. And he went, and it was horrendous. I'm not going to go into what
yeah,
he did, but it was
horrendous.
horrific.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want that, you can see the show notes afterwards. But it's like, it's not
Yeah.
really not good.
Oh,
But the reality is around that whole thing, what I found absolutely fascinating is that he had all of this, he had all these layers, he had all this
yeah.
secrecy. The thing that got one of the key things that got him was the fact that his sister forgot to throw away a note, wasn't forgot, kept
Yeah.
a note
Yeah.
and hid it in a chair leg of all place. I mean, you're thinking, she wouldn't have thought anybody would find that. But then the circumstance that led to the fact that somebody then went and did a wiretap or planted a bug,
Yeah.
they pulled the stopper off or
The
looked into the leg
same
of the one
with the
chair
same
that she had
chair.
hidden it and
Yeah.
then found it.
The
But then,
coincidence there as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
But then,
That's
I look back at that and you think after 30 years of doing this, if you were going to go into that place, they must have got used to where people hide things as well and where people
yeah.
look. So it's like that's
That's
what they went
true.
and did
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
went and looked into there as well. But when I look through just the work they did to get him and catch
Mm.
him,
Mm.
because it talks here, but the police had for 30 years been building this case.
Yes.
They'd not even looked into the internet searches of his family, but all his
Yeah.
associates. And then it was
Yeah.
everybody who, so for me, can you imagine this spider diagram of different ones who were
Yeah.
connected
With
in from
the
there?
red thread on the
Yes,
on the board
yes,
to
it is.
be
It's
all
like you
over the
see in
place.
films, isn't
Yeah.
it? I can imagine
Yeah.
they've got this little
Yeah.
face, and he connects to him, and they connect to there, and they connect to here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's
the
a
thing
big
that got
massive
him
web.
was the note from his sister confirmed that
Yeah.
this is the boss talking about it, so it must be the person. They then use the internet, but they intercepted internet searches, allowed them to see that because his associates were searching for those illnesses.
Yeah.
They then went and checked whether those associates had those cancers as well. To go,
To
is
rule
it any of
them
them? To rule them
out.
out. So eventually,
Yeah.
by narrowing it down and cutting it, eventually you get to the point where it's this whole thing from Sherlock Holmes, isn't it? If it's what was it? It's that saying if it
Yeah.
isn't
So
the if you
once
remove
you've
everything,
eliminated,
everything,
once you've
yeah,
eliminated all the possibilities, then whatever you're left with, it must be.
there's the truth, and that's
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, all the
Yeah. Something it's
probabilities.
worded much
Yeah,
better than
yeah,
that.
yeah. What's that? I'm going to say from
Words to
there,
that effect.
but
I love the idea as well that he's found this person to steal his identity essentially
yes,
so that he can register with doctors,
mm-hmm.
but then not thought, oh hang on, that's a real person who's walking around with a real phone, and they
Yes.
can cross-reference that. And
Well, it's interesting you should say that. Actually, I wasn't going to say this bit, but there's one other bit in here. Let me just quickly just pull it up because it's a whole other. It takes you down another little hilarious little path. Actually, well, not hilarious.
oh
Nothing's
yeah,
hilarious about this store.
well no.
So the man whose identity you used
Mm.
um was actually arrested.
What, because
Because
they
when
thought
it
it was
turned out,
him?
well, sort of
No.
like that. But
Okay.
so he was using that man's official ID card with his name
Yeah.
on it, but obviously with his
Yeah.
picture on.
Right.
It actually, the police suspected that this man Bonafendi was actually a member of the Cosa Nostra as well. But oh no, it gets even better than that. On top of that, the investigators suspected that he'd also received around £175,000 to actually buy a house in Western Sicily that was one of Mazzini's hideouts.
Oh, I see.
And it just keeps on going and going. It's like,
So
of all and then as they started to look through it more, they then found that the car that he was driving around, which is he had a black Alfa Romeo that Mazzini drove around. In there was found Bonafendi's identification documents that obviously would allow him to be the one that drove that car. So at this point, you can imagine at one point we're going, so just tell me here. So why is your name against this house here? How the money's gone to you? So you're not linked to this person in any way, shape, or form. I'm thinking, if you're going to steal someone's identity, aren't you going to?
So he was linked to him then?
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't a random.
Oh no, it wasn't random. It was actually one of his. He was using the identity of one of his associates. And they're like,
okay, so he might have done better to choose a more random.
Yes, well, he probably should have done what John Darwin did, a couple of ones back.
Yes.
Although I don't know whether you can do that in Italy, I think it starts to get a bit unstuck, doesn't it? But I was just like,
goodness, that's fascinating.
So
there's lots of little,
but there's all these little steps that led to them. Because obviously, imagine investigation. Imagine how much it would have cost 30 years of invested trying to find him. But you're talking millions and millions of pounds. This must have cost to find him.
But it sounds like it was well worth.
Oh, it's well worth. I think the only thing that was a bit of a downer for me is when you got to the end of it, there was a quote from a University of Essex criminology professor, Anna Sergi. And what she said is that it's doubtful that the Costa Nostra could, not my mic there. It's doubtful that the Costa Nostra could survive. It was doubtful that the Costa Nostra could survive without him, without this mythical boss, who has become the symbol of like this sort of the mafia of sort of resilience. We will fight back and everything else from there. But she said, who is going to take over, or indeed, if anyone can, remains to be seen. Because there's that whole thing that the quote is that nature abhors a vacuum, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which ultimately means
someone fills the space.
There's a market there that can be filled. Who could fill it? I mean, the reality is that when you look at the history of what's happening in there, the Italian government and also the Sicilian government, where they're not also implicated in some of these other things, is being gradually sort of cutting away at the mafia. Similar, they said about that smoke screen, that they're just removing people from around all the layers of the onion. So eventually, and once you get to that point, then people in your community will start informing against you, and you don't feel because they don't feel that they need to protect anymore. And that's basically how you stop that. It's
so it has hopefully has had a big impact on
it'll be interesting to see, because what we're on now, it's only the 3rd of May and he was arrested the 16th of January, so it'll be interesting to see what impact that does have over the future. But I think story-wise, fascinating.
I've got to say though, talking of, is it worth it to be the boss if you've got to be away from all your technology? How are you going to listen to your podcasts? Is it worth it? Don't want that job. If I can't have my phone and be plugged into my podcast 24 hours a day, I'm going to pass. So if they offer it to me, I don't want it.
Not for you. So basically, so next time you see on LinkedIn jobs come up for mob boss, then you go with that one, are you?
I'll ignore that one. Yeah, I don't want that one. Thank you. But a fascinating story. Thanks for
telling
that, Nathan.
I found it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So, this has been What's the Difference podcast. We hope you've enjoyed that story and for the business.
Yeah, we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we did. And if you did, please do rate, review, a good review, 5-star rating, please. And do subscribe. Tell all your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, don't tell anyone.
No, tell us. If you didn't enjoy it, tell us. Let us do something about it, because where we go from there. I think I'm happy to say as well, we've looked at some of the figures as well. As of today, over 250 people have watched some of our podcasts. So I'm like over the moon.
Or listen to.
Oh, listen to. Sorry, not watch. Listen to. Listen. Oh, yes. The problem is, folks, I can see Claire when I'm doing this. So
we're watching.
We're watching, but you're not. You're listening. So
I hope you are enjoying it.
It's really, really good. And that's it. So I'm going to say
that's it until next week.
it is. Goodbye now.
Goodbye.